Senator Mitt Romney, an outspoken critic of Donald Trump's, did not get a welcome reception while he was speaking to Republican voters at the Utah Republican State Convention. Here's how it went down.
So what do you think about President Biden's first 100 days? Now, you know me as a person who says what he thinks, and I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues. And I'm also no fan. Aren't you embarrassed? And I'm also no fan of the president's. Yeah, sure.
My friends, this is the moment I was talking about. Please, thank you, show respect.
Oh, the moment where he's like, "Aren't you embarrassed?" I'm like, Romney, not the way to go about this. It's just, but there's no winning because he's still just as delusional as Mitch McConnell is about the state of the Republican Party. The state of the Republican Party revolves around Donald Trump. That is not gonna change. It's just not gonna change. This is what the party has become.
Yeah, the mittens came off there. And so look, couple things. Utah is supposed to be among the Republican states, like the most civil. They've got this very, friendly Mormon attitude. Plus, they're actually very pro-immigrant, which is unusual for a red state because Mormons immigrated to Mexico and then back to America and have an immigrant culture because they came originally from the east to the west. So if anywhere that message of, hey, look, we don't like Trump's character, but we love all his policies and all that stuff would work, it would be Utah. And it's not even working there. No, the party is gone. They're not getting it. Anna's right. Mitch McConnell talking about Tim Scott is the future of the Republican Party? No, you sound like the past of the Republican Party. Yeah. Like, hey, don't worry about racism and aren't corporations great? No. I mean, to the credit of the Republicans, they think these days that corporations are not that great and corrupt politicians are not that great. To the discredit of the Republican voters, they think racism not so bad, democracy optional. Right? Now, to the credit of Mitt Romney, it did take some courage, unless he was completely deluded and thought, oh no, I'll single-handedly win back the Republican Party. It took some courage to say no in the face of what was going to be some degree of wrath, and it turns out a tremendous amount of wrath for voting to impeach Trump twice. He did it, and he was very harsh in his rhetoric against Trump, and he's saying, I'm not gonna back down. This is what I believe, and I agree with you on the policies, but I don't agree with you on Trump. And I'll give him credit for that courage.
Well, that courage, I guess, for lack of a better word, continues in the next clip. Let's take a look at that, and then we'll talk about the GOP attempting to censure him.
So yeah, I understand that I have a few folks that don't like me terribly much, and I'm sorry about that. But I express my mind as I believe is right, and I follow my conscience as I believe is right. I'm not a fan of the current president's policies. In his inauguration speech, you probably heard it, he promised bipartisanship. And I guess by bipartisanship, he means the Democratic Party on one side and the socialists on the other. And then this week, he correctly said that China poses an existential threat to our democracy. And his answer to that is apparently 2 years of free TK, excuse me, 2 years of free pre-K. I like Joe Biden. He's a nice person. I think he has good intentions, but I think, but at the same time.
Okay, so I want to just quickly mention that video demonstrated that Senator Romney is having a difficult time figuring out what his own political ideology and branding should be. Because in that video, clearly he's trying to kind of speak out against some of the more progressive policy proposals coming from the Biden administration. We've already talked about how those policy proposals are not enough for what we would like to see. But he's trying to speak out against these programs that, honestly, if they were proposed by Donald Trump, his constituents would love it. They would love it, because the one thing that Trump did that worked was this fake populism, right? Pretending as though he understands and empathizes with the economic concerns of Americans, and particularly Republican voters. Now, clearly he doesn't actually care about those things. He didn't actually deliver on those things, but his rhetoric was very different from his actions. Now, putting that aside, remember, Cenk, Romney was one of the Republicans who proposed a pretty good program for child tax credits. Now, it was a Trojan horse and it would have cut government programs that people need, but on the surface, he was attempting to appeal to Republican voters much the same way that Donald Trump did. And then it's interesting to see him in that video where he reverts back to the old school GOP talking points that are against the government programs meant to help Americans.
Yeah, of course. And so, look, man, I'm telling you, there's a strand within the Republican Party, the Republican voters, that is a positive one. They now can't stand corporate politicians like Mitt Romney. So that's really positive, and they're rebelling at this basically corporate control, elitist establishment types, and that's a wonderful development overall. The problem is they gotta let the racism and the fascism go, and they're just not there. And that's part of that comes along with right-wing populism. The other thing is, look, I'm not in favor of civility. I think civility is code word for don't fight, don't do anything, don't change anything, etc.
Just be quiet.
Yeah, be quiet. But man, there are some bounds of reason. Like, and I don't mean them booing Romney. Great, boom, what do I care, right? But when he says, like, I like Biden as a man, they're like, boo, God damn it, boo, right? Like, I don't need to, I think Biden is too corporate controlled, but I don't despise him as a person.
Right.
And there's like this viciousness in the right wing that they just can't get away from.
Now imagine though, Cenk, imagine if Biden actually delivered on what he claims he wants to accomplish, which is, the American Families Plan, the infrastructure plan, these proposals that absolutely would improve the lives of the very people who were booing him in that video. Biden has an opportunity here, right? Not through rhetoric, but through actually fighting for and accomplishing policies to improve these people's lives and actually deliver what Donald Trump claimed he wanted to deliver.
Yeah.
He has an opportunity.
He's not gonna do it.
But that's the thing. And if he doesn't do it, that paves the way for a crushing political loss in an upcoming presidential election. It just does. It just does. This is it. I mean, if the Democratic Party does not deliver, I'm worried about what's gonna happen in the next presidential election. If not then the following presidential election. When, you think people are angry, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, about the economic inequality that we're experiencing today. Imagine how it's gonna be in 4 years or 8 years if this trend continues.
Yeah, so look, there's this specific part of this story, which is, again, I'm gonna give Romney a little bit of different credit too, which is that at least he didn't humiliate himself like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, where they just lost all of their moral core. They never had it to begin with, but their dignity, right? And they were like, yes, Donald Trump will do anything you want, and started licking his boots the most pathetic beta way you've ever seen in your life. So at least Romney didn't do that, okay? But the more important part of the story is the general note, which is both corporate Republicans like Romney and corporate Democrats like Biden, they don't get it. The number one reason why Trump was so popular in the Republican Party is not racism or fascism or the cult of personality. Now, those things are real and they did have an effect, but the number one reason is because he told the establishment to F off. And both Republican voters and now a growing percentage of Democratic voters say, yes, yes, please. We hate the establishment. We hate you elitists. You've never done anything for us. Anna's right. If Democrats actually did do something for them, if they actually did pass a $15 minimum wage, they actually got them health care or a permanent child tax credit, etc. By the way, why did Biden's numbers go up? Because, people love Biden and he's from Scranton and etc. No, the only reason Biden's numbers went up and are really high now is because he actually delivered for people. He gave them checks. He did something about unemployment and the foreclosures, etc. So the minute he stops doing that, which is imminently, they're going to go back to losing those voters. And the establishment cannot see past their own perspective. They think they're beloved by the American people, and they are not. I mean, Trump, who is the worst of us, became that popular on one simple thing: screw the establishment.
Now, one final thing I wanted to mention is that Republican lawmakers were attempting to censure Senator Romney, and they almost did, but they decided not to by a very narrow margin. After the Salt Lake Tribune described a vigorous debate, delegates, excuse me, delegates at the state party convention on Saturday voted narrowly against censuring him, 798 to 711.
And remember, they censured Liz Cheney and almost everyone else in their state parties that dared to cross Donald Trump. And here, Romney barely survives the censure vote, but the message is loud and clear in both the vote and the boos. No, this is Donald Trump's party. And if you think anything else, you're totally kidding yourself. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.